Thank you for joining us, virtually that is. Since we've had no new board or staff members join the call since the end of the executive committee meeting, we can begin. We have today's agenda before us. I'd like to ask for approval of an amended agenda to allow for an update from staff on Tuesday's red line derailment outside of the Silver Spring station. Could I get such a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the agenda as amended? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as amended. We also have the minutes from our last meeting before us for approval. I trust that everyone has the opportunity to review the minutes from our May 14th Safety and Operations Committee meeting. Unless there are objections, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. Are there any objections? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as well. Thank you. I'll now ask that staff provide today's two updates. First, on Tuesday's red line derailment, and second, on the corrective actions implemented after the collision between two out-of-service trains outside the Farragut West Station on October 7th, 2019. Ms. Impastato, our Chief Safety Officer, could you discuss now these two agenda items? Ms. Impastato.
Yes, sir, there are presentation materials. I believe they're being loaded. This presentation will provide a preliminary briefing regarding the derailment of train 108 in the area of the Silver Spring Metro Station. Information in this presentation is considered preliminary. The mission of WMATA's safety team is to investigate and determine the facts, conditions, and circumstances of accidents and incidents which occur on the system. The investigation will determine the probable cause or causes and contributing factors to the incident. Metro's safety team will issue recommendations to prevent similar accidents. The safety team is comprised of subject matter experts and specialists with experience in multiple facets of transportation, operations, and maintenance. Safety will work collaboratively with Metro's operations team to support the implementation of recommended corrective actions and will perform safety assurance and oversight activities to monitor both the progress and the efficacy of the aforementioned corrective actions. At approximately 11:20 a.m. on July the 7th, Metro Red Line Train 108 derailed one wheel set upon departure from Silver Spring Station on track number 1. There were 32 passengers on board the train at the time of the incident. No injuries were reported by passengers or the operator of the train. 6 of the 8 cars remained at the platform, allowing for safe egress of passengers. Montgomery County Fire Response Service, Metro Transit Police, Metro Safety, and Metro's operations teams all responded to the scene and commenced an investigation. This slide depicts a diagram of the incident scene. Train number 880, a test train which was not carrying passengers, was located in the pocket track north of the station at the time of the incident. A Metro train operator was occupying the rear cab of that train 880 and observed the derailment of train number 108. Train 108 departed the station proceeding north. A wayside signal is located in advance of the switch into the pocket track. Train 108 operated past the signal and into the interlocking. One wheel set of the second car of the train derailed at the switch. A preliminary chronology based upon review of control center radio recordings, CCTV footage, and statements from employees appears in this slide. Of note, all times are considered approximate as multiple system clocks were being reviewed and synchronized. At approximately 11:20 a.m., train 108 departs the station proceeding north and derails moments later in the interlocking. The operator of train 880 initially reports the derailment of train 108, which is confirmed by the operator of train 108 moments later. The operator of train 108 subsequently requests the controller acknowledge his transmission. The controller on duty issues unrelated instructions to other trains before acknowledging the report approximately 3 minutes afterwards, and proceeds to give instructions to the operator of train 108 to attend to the scene. Metro supervisors arrive on scene within approximately 5 minutes of the incident. 31 passengers are offloaded to the station platform through the train car doors, which were aligned with the platform. One passenger who was present in the first car of the train remained on board the train with the train operator until they were escorted by the Montgomery County Fire Rescue Service back to the platform. After completing the on-scene inspections and measurements to gather relevant evidence, the scene was released for rerailing activities and subsequent safety inspections. The tracks were placed back in service at 5 a.m. Metro notified the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission at 11:42 a.m. of the incident. The WMSC responded to the scene and accompanied Metro investigators as the scene was examined, as well as participating in interviews of involved personnel. We continue to share information and analysis with the WMSC in an open and transparent manner. With regard to the findings of the on-scene investigation, the derailment occurred at the switch leading from the main line to the pocket track. All train cars remained in line and upright, with one wheel set of the second train car derailed. The lead car came to rest approximately 240 feet beyond the end of the platform. The picture in the upper left of this slide illustrates the derailed wheel set in the position in which it came to rest. The center photo depicts the position of the train over the switch. The photo on the far right hand depicts the resting position of the train, as well as the position of the wayside signal. There was no visible damage observed to the car body or interior of the train. Damage to the derailed wheel set was observed on scene. This slide illustrates the preliminary findings of the investigation with regard to engineered systems. Inspections conducted on scene did not identify any anomalies or conditions which were out of tolerance with regard to the track system. Inspection histories are currently being reviewed, and an assessment was completed to assure safety prior to the restoration of service. Inspections conducted on scene did not identify anomalies or conditions which were out of tolerance with regard to the power distribution system, and inspection history reviews are underway. Communication systems were operational and performing as designed per inspections and testing conducted on scene and a review of communications logs. A review of the communication system history is underway. On-scene testing is underway with regard to the signaling system. The review of the system history is underway, and a safety assessment has been completed for restoration of service. Inspections conducted on scene did not identify any anomalies which indicated any out of tolerance issues with regard to the train set. A review of data recorders, including onboard recorders and inward and outward facing cameras, is currently underway. Damage assessments for the train set are currently in process. No anomalies or unusual conditions were identified in the Rail Operations Control Center at the time of the incident. There were no issues with transmission or reception of radio communications. Emergency protocol adherence is currently being reviewed. Preliminary fact-finding with regard to operations and human factors indicates that there were no unusual conditions at the time of the incident, and all training and qualifications of the operator and controllers were complete and current. Required post-incident testing was conducted of the controller and the operator. Both the actions of the Metro operator and the response from the Rail Operations Control Center are under review in a human factors investigation. Human factors investigations use multiple disciplines of established science to understand how people perform under different circumstances. Human factors often directly cause or contribute to incidents and accidents. A thorough human factors investigation will allow us to understand the properties of the human elements of our system, which will inform the design, development, and deployment of effective mitigations to prevent recurrence. All involved personnel have undergone preliminary interviews, and additional interviews are planned as part of the human factors investigation. With regard to next steps, Metro will complete follow-up interviews with employees, review integrated data records and testing results to identify the probable causes and contributing factors. We will review our current operation protocols and technology potential for improvements. We will also review training and qualification protocols in order to develop and implement corrective action plans. It is anticipated within 60 days, Metro will finalize the report identifying the probable cause, contributing factors, recommendations, and corrective action plans to prevent recurrence, and submit that report to the WMSC. This concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Impastato. I think that would be good that we first do a round of questions on the red line derailment and then move on to the Farragut West incident that you'll report on as well. I have to say preliminarily that Metro caught a big break here. You know, that while there are no casualties resulting from this accident, it's largely a result of the fact that we're in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and there were only 32 passengers and one operator aboard a train which theoretically may have had, you know, almost 90% more passengers if we were in normal times and under normal operating conditions. So instead of a 8-car train with perhaps 300 passengers, we ended up with just 32 passengers, which made the potential for injury much less and the ability to evacuate much easier for the Montgomery County fire and rescue personnel. So I think we should take this accident quite seriously and try to get to the bottom of it, because under more normal circumstances, this could have been a very, very serious and with greater risk for injury of riders. Let me ask the first question, then we'll move through the committee members and then the other members of the board who may have questions. So Ms. Impastato, as I understand this, there was a train in the pocket track. So I think the first question was, apparently the switch was on the direction of the pocket track as this train moved up to the red signal. Is that correct understanding of the facts preliminarily from your investigation?
Yes, preliminary data indicates the route was lined for the pocket track.
And was that because the train had just moved into the pocket track, or had the switch somehow moved back and forth from main line to the pocket track inadvertently, or as a non-scheduled movement?
There was a scheduled movement of train 880 into the pocket track before train 108 approached the station. It would be premature of me to state the exact succession of commands that went into the field. We are reviewing that right now as part of our investigation.
And is it your understanding right now that mechanically, while the train with the 32 passengers was progressing into the pocket track, that the switch moved back to the mainline position?
That is something that we are currently investigating to determine the exact chronology of events.
Okay. Because I think those are the critical pieces of information to try and understand, why, well, one part of the critical information is why the switch moved back to mainline and didn't stay on for movement to the left into the pocket track, as well as to understand the sequence of what the operator was doing vis-a-vis the red light signal. Mr. Horner.
Sure. Say, just a question of a factual nature. Was this track switched back to the main line while the train was passing over the intersection?
We don't have the fully integrated data records to show the full chronology of the events. There was a request sent to the field, but we don't have the chronology lined out yet in the investigation. So it would be improper of me to speculate at this point. We are looking very closely at the behavior of the field equipment. We don't believe it to be anomalous at this point, but we are confirming that everything occurred correctly.
Okay. I don't have more questions at the moment.
Sure. Ms. Skidbig?
I know that we've been doing ATC updates to help to ensure that there's less human factors. Have we completed all of those? And for the ones in this area, have they been done already?
We're reviewing the work history for the past 3 months in the area. There has been some work performed in the area. I'll have to circle back with you when we determine the exact date and scope and nature of the work that's been completed.
Okay. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Letourneau.
So where is the track switching itself? How does that happen? Where is that controlled? Is it at the rock?
With regard to your question, you're asking how the command is sent to...
Yeah, so that track was obviously switched over to the pocket track. Who does that?
Okay. The lining of the routes is controlled via a supervisory control and data acquisition system that is located at the Rail Operations Control Center. The rail operations traffic controllers manipulate those assets remotely.
So when train, and this is all hypothetical, but when train 880 moved over to the pocket, would that operator then send a signal or communicate with the rock to say that he's now in the pocket and the train can be switched back? And I'm not necessarily speaking about this specific incident, but just in general.
The operator would provide verbal confirmation that he's completed his move. The system in the field does detect the moves that are made and communicates with the rail traffic controllers via an integrated SCADA display system.
Okay. So would there be a command or a request to move the signal, move the track switch back to the main line manually, or would that happen automatically, or how would that happen?
Under our current operational protocols, manipulation of switches into and out of pocket tracks are handled in manual mode, which means that the rail traffic controller would have initiated that move manually, not in automatic.
Okay. And from the picture that you provided from the outward facing camera on train 108, the signal was red at the time?
That is correct, sir.
So was there an indication that the train went past the red signal?
That is correct.
Okay, and it was likely red because it was switched to the pocket track.
Or a route wasn't lined.
Or a route wasn't lined. Okay, so the operator is supposed to manually stop upon a red signal.
That's correct.
Okay. And then finally, just to follow up a little bit on what Ms. Gidby asked. So we've been on some version of manual control for a long time. Is there, I assume an automatic train control system in that scenario, if we were under ATC, the train would stop automatically at a red signal?
If we were under automatic train operation.
Right, okay, ATO,
training
yeah,
stop, yes.
okay. Is it our intent to get back to that at some point? I haven't heard anything really about it in a long time.
That is definitely something we're looking at. I defer to my colleague, Mr. Leader, as to the status and anticipated timeline for that.
Okay, we don't have to do it this second, but I want to follow up on that issue because I think that, as Ms. Gideby said, that is a central issue here because looking at these incidents, you know, don't want to speculate about this incident, but in general, human factors seem to be a major contributor. And it's concerning that we continue to have these issues despite what I know is a renewed focus management on safety issues.
Very good.
Lisa, this is Joe Leader. I'm actually on the Zoom meeting. Mr. Letourneau, yes, there is a study that was out. It's with engineering right now, our capital programs, reviewing what is the best mode to either go back into ATO or should we look at just upgrading our system and then look at another signaling system. So we're in the process of looking at that report, performing another study and determining how to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've gone through the committee members. Now we'll ask other board members if they have any questions. Secretary Slater.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. No questions for me, thank you.
Mr. McMillan.
Yes, could you go back to slide 4, please? Just want to fill in one part of the timeline. Next one, slide 4. Thank you. The timeline with respect to calling in Montgomery County Fire and Rescue, we have when they arrived and when they departed. First, do we have the data point on what time Montgomery County Fire and Rescue was called? And then secondly, if you could just comment in general what the normal protocol would be, what level of incident would prompt a call to fire and rescue, and how soon would we expect or hope that a call like that would be made?
The specific timeline that the call was made, I will have to get back to you. It was after the rail traffic controller acknowledged the communication, so in the approximately 11:25, almost 11:26 time period. The normal protocol for a report of a derailment would be immediate acknowledgement and immediate emergency response contact to be made.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure there'll be a more detailed follow-up after you've done more investigation. Thank you.
Mr. Meridian.
No questions, thank you.
Chair Smedberg.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Mr. Letourneau and I had similar thoughts and questions, but I do have just 2 others. Ms. Impastato, staying on this slide here, the one at 11:22, where train 108 says to the Rock Central, did you copy my last transmission? What does that mean exactly to you?
Approximately 1 minute and 15 seconds after initially reporting that his train was on the ground and not receiving a response, train number 108 made a second transmission to the control center, asking the control center to acknowledge their transmission.
Is that a concern for you?
Yes, it is.
So potentially another issue at the Rock related to this investigation.
Yes, sir. We are looking very deeply into the sequence and subsequent reactions within the control center's response.
Thank you. And lastly, in regard to the interviews, is there what is the time period in which you try to get people in and have them interviewed? Obviously, over time, even a relatively short period of time, specific details and factors could, be forgotten or thought about differently. You said you have yet to do interviews. Are we within the acceptable time frame by your standards, or are we getting out of that zone, so to speak?
Oh, sir, we've conducted preliminary
You
interviews.
have conducted them?
Yes.
Okay.
They were conducted same day. Our
Okay.
normal process is for preliminary interviews to be conducted as close to the event as possible, and then subsequent follow-up interviews
Okay.
after we have downloads and data synthesization so that we can compare what involved individuals witnessed or relayed to us with the artifacts that we've determined from the scene.
Yep. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Ms. Impastato, can we go back to the prior slide showing the track diagram? And I just wanted to clear up one other point, which I think is worth clearing up before we move on to the Farragut West incident. What is the standard protocol for a train operator where he has a red signal before a switch like this? I know that there are some, as we talked about before, circumstances where a train operator can move through a red signal at some minimum amount of speed without any prior approval from the ROC. Is the protocol that he is still allowed in this situation to move forward despite the red signal, or does the presence of the signal with the switch signal, set up a different protocol where a operator does have to communicate with the ROC and get approval before moving forward?
In the event of a signal that's displaying a stop indication, under any circumstances, a train operator must contact the control center and receive specific authorization from the rail traffic controller to proceed past the stop signal. The operator, when they proceed past that stop signal, must do so at a reduced speed, continuing to assess the visible conditions, looking out for the position of switches, looking out for the integrity of the infrastructure ahead of them. That did not occur in this incident.
So the protocol is clear that in all situations where an operator approaches a red signal, he must secure authorization from the ROC to move forward.
That's correct.
All right. Any other questions from members of the committee before we move on to the Farragut West incident? Hearing none, seeing no hands raised. Thank you for that, and let's move on to the Farragut West incident from last year and what steps have been taken since then in terms of remediation and further actions. Ms. Impastato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This presentation will provide an update on the progress of Metro's corrective actions stemming from the October 7th, 2019 collision between two out-of-service trains in the area of Farragut West Station. In review, on October the 7th, 2019, two out-of-service trains without passengers collided in the area near Farragut West Station. Non-life-threatening injuries to two operators were treated and released. The Metro investigation completed in January of 2020. Human factors of an unspecified nature resulting in the loss of situational awareness by the operator were determined as the probable cause of the incident. Metro undertook corrective actions of an administrative and technical nature. Administratively, Metro issued a lessons learned briefing, held a number of town hall sessions with employees reviewing the incident as well as the appropriate and required actions to take when operating under a zero speed command. Metro also held an emergency response and investigation debriefing and critique with emergency response agencies as well as the WMSC to determine if there were opportunities for improvement to the investigation process and the emergency response. In accordance with the WMSC findings and directives, Metro has modified the electronic device policy to assist in future investigation processes. Metro has also formed a joint labor management team to review and make recommendations to enhance Metro's fatigue risk management program. Based upon the findings of the investigation, Metro initiated a review of the disqualification policy for operating employees. Technically, Metro has enhanced our specification for inward and outward facing cameras in new equipment procurements and has committed to installing a stop and proceed acknowledgement mode in the legacy fleet. Lastly, Metro has formed a root cause corrective action committee to review opportunities to enhance compliance with speed commands on an ongoing basis. To date, the RCCA committee has implemented a new employee check ride and mentoring process, as well as reviewing and implementing changes to training curriculum to enhance understanding of safety critical tasks and equipment. Additionally, this team is currently implementing enhanced proficiency evaluation programs for operators. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you. So we'll go do the same thing with a round of questions. Let me start off with a question on the first slide. We can go back to the first slide where you indicate in the final bullet point that human factors were determined as the probable cause of the incident. Could you just discuss or explain what is meant by that term, human factors are found to be the probable cause? What kind of behavior of the operator would be included in this conclusion for this specific investigation? And the point I want to emphasize here is I think in the materials, we've learned that the tox tests for the operator were negative. So that I'm trying to identify, now that we have the tox tests out of the way, what other factors or behavior of the operator comes under the concept here of human factors to determine that that was the probable cause of the incident.
Yes, sir. So exclusionarily, there were no systemic failures of engineered systems that were observed or determined throughout the investigation. After excluding any type of a systemic failure, we focused our attention on human factors, which includes review of the mental, physical, and emotional state of an individual, as well as human-machine interaction and interface, the limits of human capacity with regard to physical capacity and mental processing. With this incident, we did not have an ability to view the occurrences inside of the operating cab. The legacy fleet do not have inward-facing cameras. So absent external and independent ability to review what occurred in the cab, and absent any eyewitnesses to the incident, we were limited in our ability to determine the human factors which resulted in the operator's loss of situational awareness. We did exclude any medical conditions, any fatigue issues. We did interview the operator and do a thorough fatigue analysis. The operator was adamant that they were not fatigued, that they were alert and responsive at the time of the incident. Again, absent inward-facing cameras, we couldn't confirm this visually. The best that we could do was with regard to the statements that the operator made. We did, with the assistance of the Office of the Inspector General, investigate whether or not the operator was utilizing an electronic device. We excluded the use of an electronic device as a potential distraction. Hence the finding of human factors of an unspecified nature, essentially meaning the employee was distracted and not focusing on the incident at the time of the incident, and we are unable to cite a specific nature or genesis of that distraction.
And why did you conclude that there was no electronic device being used at the time of the incident?
The Office of the Inspector General assisted Metro in securing the cellular phone records of the operator. And through the Inspector General's investigation, they were able to confirm that there was not an electronic device registered to the operator that was in use in the area of the incident at the time of the incident.
So there was no cell phone that was being used at the time of the incident. Is that the conclusion? I don't want to put words in their mouth, but is that your understanding of the OIG conclusion?
Yes.
Thank you. I have one more question before we move on. On slide 3, you discuss the addition of the stop and proceed mode acknowledgement system to the legacy fleet. 3 questions there. Could you just describe for board members and public what that new system will actually do? Second, how many rail cars are in the legacy fleet that will be covered by this new system? And third, a time frame. When will the installation begin and when will it be completed? Because I know you've said that the procurement was underway, but if we can be more precise on that third part as to when installation is expected to begin, if it has already begun, perhaps, and when it will be completed for that cars in the legacy fleet.
Certainly. To answer your first question, the stop and proceed mode acknowledgement function is a software function that is currently installed on all of Metro's 7000 series trains. When a train has a 0 speed command, they are required to bring their train to a stop. In the event that they don't bring their train to a stop, the train's automatic braking will initiate a penalty to bring the train to a stop. When the train is at a full stop, the operator will receive a randomly generated multiple-digit code from the train set. They are required to re-enter that code into a display, which will unlock the train set and permit it to move at a speed not exceeding 15 miles per hour. The 6000 series train sets are already underway with a modification to add this function, and the legacy fleet is currently undergoing that effort. I would defer to Mr. Leader as to the number of cars in the legacy fleet and the status of that effort, along with the project installation timeline. I will say that there have been some delays to the project by virtue of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I believe Mr. Leader could provide additional follow-up information on the schedule and timeline.
Very good. Mr. Leader, if you're still with us, can you just provide that information, the number of cars in the legacy fleet that will be equipped with this new system, and what's the timeline for the start and the completion of that installation?
Yes, I am. I'm still here. Regarding the legacy fleet, we have the 2000 series, 3000 series, and the 6000 series that would have to be completed. It's roughly about 500 cars that need to be done. We are currently working with an outside vendor to have that design put in place. What's different from the legacy fleet is with the 7K, we have a display. And in the legacy fleet, we would have to come up with a different way of display and inputting into that system. So it's being designed right now. I don't have a schedule in the sense of when that design will be completed and when we will start installation.
And on the 6Ks, or what's the status of the installation on those that Ms. Impastato described as being underway? How many cars there, and what's the completion date?
I believe there's roughly about 156, if my number is right. It's in the mid 100s on the 6Ks. I would have to get back to you on the schedule.
Okay. But in terms of schedule, is that something to be completed? Are we talking about by the end of 2020 or 2021? What's our general time frame?
I believe we're looking at 2021.
2021. So sort of we have about the 7,000 cars, about 750 cars, which have this kind of safety system now. And by the end of 2021, we should have another 156 of the 6,000 series equipped with it. And the 2,000 and 3,000s, which are another 5,000 cars, are still to be determined when the installation dates would be from that. Is that a fair summary?
Sorry, I will get back to you on schedule.
Thank you, appreciate that. Mr. Horner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question, Teresa, and thank you for your report. It's thorough as always. My first question has to do with your referring several times to the absence of cameras in the cabs or the driver's area, which has prevented us from better understanding which human factor contributed to the accident. I would have reservations about the installation of cameras in the cabs because it's a kind of surveillance that bespeaks a lack of confidence in personnel that can be demoralizing. So having said that, I wanted to know whether the absence of cameras in the cabs to date is a result of any prohibition on installation of cameras in the cabs by an agreement into which WMATA has entered with other parties or by regulation, to your knowledge.
No, sir, it's not the result of a prohibition. In fact, we have inward and outward facing cameras in the 7,000 series fleet. From an investigatory standpoint, inward and outward facing camera footage are immensely, if not entirely invaluable to determining the events which took place in the cab. Inward facing camera footage allows us to see exactly what took place, whether or not where the operator was looking, what their body position was, whether or not there are any signs or symptoms of fatigue, such as micro-napping. We can look at their purview, what they could see through outward facing cameras as well. I'm not aware of any concerns or prohibitions. I believe the legacy fleet just predates the widespread installation of inward and outward facing cameras in our fleet.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And the what would be the subject matter of the lessons learned noted in the first sub-bullet of this? I'm asking in part with a tone of skepticism because while we acknowledge a human factor contributed to the accident, we don't know which kind of behavior, which specific kind of behavior contributed to the accident. We just have said that there was, on the part of the driver, a loss of situational awareness. In the absence of information about the behavior that caused the accident, what lessons can we learn from this incident?
The lessons learned document emphasize the appropriate protocols to follow with regard to bringing the train to a stop when there's a loss of speed commands, as well as with regard to communications protocols for contacting the control center when you experience a loss of speed command.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. I don't have more questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Impastato.
Ms. Skidby.
This question may have been answered. I'm not sure if I heard it. If it was, what is the percentage of legacy cars that we still have running? I know we have the 2000, 6000 series, but what is that in comparison to the fleet? And then do we prioritize putting more of the 7000 series and 800 series on the road over the older systems, or how are we phasing them out in terms of use?
Okay, in terms of the legacy fleet versus the 7Ks, we have well over 750 of the 7Ks, and the majority of them are in service right now. And even pre-COVID, when we were running more service, we were running more 8-car trains, meaning the 7Ks were being utilized as much as possible. In terms of ratio, like I said, it was about over 750 7Ks. There's about 500 of these 6000 series, 2000 series, and 3000 series. So we lump the 6000s with the 2000s and 3000s as part of the legacy fleet.
And Mr. Leader, like, what is the percentage based off of? So you're saying we have 500, and then we have the 750 of the 7000 Ks. Is that what you're saying? Well, I'm just trying to get. Okay. So we still have, okay. And in terms of what we use, is it that we prioritize though using the 7000?
We typically use pre-COVID, we were prioritizing the 6000 and the 7000 series cars.
Okay.
But we do, because of the fact that cars have to be, and train sets have to be brought in for service and PMIs, there are 2000 to 3000 series that are going to be running. And throughout the day, our service pattern changes. So our AM and PM will have more train sets that are out there versus midday and late night.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Letourneau?
Thank you. So looking at the Safety Commission's report on this incident, there were a number of corrective actions that were recommended. It sounds as if all of those are being implemented. The one that's going to take the longest is the installation of the stop and proceed technology. Do you have any further comment beyond what was presented in the Safety Commission report on that in terms of timing?
I believe Mr. Leader provided an answer to a similar question. I defer
Yeah.
on the timeline. But I do believe that will be the longest lead item.
There's nothing we can do to speed it up, though.
We are working to expedite.
Okay. All right. So the other question I had was on the employee disqualification policy. So the statement in our materials is that META is reviewing the disciplinary policy regarding employee disqualification events, which is underway. This employee, the train operator of this incident, was separated. So what is it that's causing us to review the policy, the employee disqualification policy? I mean, is there a specific concern that's leading to that review?
When it comes to disqualification and discipline, that's part of the collective bargaining agreement. So we have to work with the union if we're going to change that. On the bus side, we are looking at changing our accident policy, which involves discipline, but we're not there yet, and we can do the same thing on rail.
Joe, what is it we would want to change?
I think what we would like to change is, well, bus and rail is slightly different. I think what we would like to do is look at, similar to what we did on our attendance policy, is look at the amount of discipline and incidents it takes to disqualify somebody.
Sorry, you faded out there for a sec. Say the last part again.
We would like to look at the types of incidents that occur and look at, could one incident disqualify somebody versus having multiple incidents and having multiple disciplines based on those incidents. That's what we would like to look at.
So is there some specific language currently that requires there to be multiple incidents, or what's the threshold now?
It's, I don't I don't want to say it's, there's not one threshold that's going to change it depending on the types of incidents. But what I can tell you is we lost in arbitration, okay, that any modifications we make when it comes to discipline regarding attendance or incidents have to be negotiated and agreed upon by the union. So we have to work with our union to kind of come up with that, and we're in the process of doing that.
Are you optimistic that there is a attitude of cooperation on that?
I think so. I think we have right now, we have a very good relationship with Local 689 compared to where we were about 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we went with them on the attendance policy, and we had two different types of attendance policy. We had one for lateness and AWOL, and we had one for being sick. And we were able to combine all three, okay, and come up with a point system or a number of incidents to get rid of a person that did not want to come to work. It took time to get that way. I think when we approach them on where we would like to go with our incident or accident type policies, I think we will get there. But it's something that takes work.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and I certainly would hope that all of our employees would share and buy into really the culture of safety, which also requires acknowledgement and self-policing and accountability for everybody involved.
Sure.
And I
But
think,
just to let you know, something as a violation of a cell phone while operating a bus or a rail car would be immediate termination. So we do have policies in place for certain types of offenses. But in this case, I know there was some concern about the number of incidents this employee had based on the old DAP policy that was in place. But, you know, labor relations in the field worked through, and, you know, that employee, based on the old DAP policy, okay, had the right to stay in his position. So that's what we're looking to see if we could change.
Okay.
We do have policies for certain violations.
thank you for clarifying that, though. Thank you.
All right, Secretary Slater.
My questions were largely answered by Ms. Gitaby's questioning, so no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Mr. Marudian.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Chair Smedberg.
Nothing from me either. Thank you.
Very good. That completes the work of the Safety and Operations Committee for today. I guess I would, in conclusion, just like to sum up my view of this, and that is that from a safety point of view, I find both of these incidents very concerning because they seem to both involve the qualification of the train operator, since human factors seems to be the probable cause in the Farragut West incident, and at least it seems to point in that direction preliminarily on the Silver Spring incident. And it also both raised questions concerning communication between the train operator and the ROC, a matter that we've been looking at for the past number of months. So both of these incidents concern me from a safety perspective, and we should just thank God that both of them involved situations where injury to riders was minimized. In the one case, one was a non-revenue operation in the early morning hours. And the more recent one, of course, is in the midst of this COVID pandemic, which has left us with carrying about 90% less rail passengers than we normally do. So I hope we can continue examining these issues, and as a board and as management stay on top of these issues, because they do seem to raise some real concerns here that we need to address. On the Silver Spring incident, we've left you with a few follow-up questions and issues to come back to us on. And, you know, please come back to us when those matters are completed, your investigation, as well as the information on installing the stop and aware system And if it requires a meeting next month of this committee to deal with it, we're prepared to address it. Don't feel that these matters need to wait till September. I think they raise to a high level in my mind. And as chair of the Safety and Operations Committee, if we have more information that the board members and the committee members need to address, we should deal with that next month. And you shouldn't feel that you have to wait to September to bring these kind of matters back to our attention.
Thank you, sir. I assure you I'll provide an update as the facts are established.
Thank you very much. And I understand that you will, and I appreciate that very much. That completes the work.
Mr. Chair, I was hoping that one of the things that could be added to the September agenda as well for the Safety and Operations Committee is also a look at a bus update. I think that this discussion with rail and what has been the consistent review of what has been happening on the rail side for the last few months speaks to the fact that we spent a lot of time really focusing on those issues, but we haven't necessarily been able to really prioritize also hearing on what is happening on the bus side of things. And I think a lot of the discussion that we had, and even as it relates to some of the transit equity pieces that we talked about earlier, speaks to an opportunity for us to just ensure that we have a dedicated agenda piece as well. And so since the September updates include a quarterly update to the extent that we can prioritize also hearing about what is happening on Metro Bus, I think that would be appreciated. And I look forward to working with you about potential topics that we may be able to highlight at a minimum monthly that also prioritize the challenges that we're seeing on Metro Bus as well. So thank you.
Right. I assume, Ms. Skinneby, you're talking about ridership levels on bus generally and on specific routes that may have very high ridership levels that may be causing congestion or crowding on buses, especially during this period of the COVID pandemic, are the things that you would like to see the staff highlight in that presentation?
Yes, I would also just go beyond that. And I think really building, I know that the general manager has shared that we will definitely get an update on the bus transformation study separately, but I think being able to just highlight that I'm not sure anyone really technically oversees the regional bus network and how we coordinate, or if there are current meetings that bring together the various providers of the bus system together annually. And so to the extent that we can just get an update of how those things are coordinated, especially during this time of COVID, understanding that the majority of our riders are right now taking Metro Bus, it would be helpful to understand how we're prioritizing and hearing about the challenges that are happening during this time. So thank you.
I think those are some very good ideas, and I'm sure staff will be able to work up something for our September meeting, and I'd ask the corporate secretary to make sure that we add that if it's not already part of the agenda for the September meeting of the Safety and Operations Committee.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Seeing no further business to come before the committee will stand adjourned for this month of July. The next item on the agenda is the Finance and Capital Committee meeting, which will begin shortly. Please stand by and stay tuned for that meeting. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Jennifer, do we need to wait for anything, or should we just charge ahead?
Sir, you may begin. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Steve McMillan,